Now, how did I meet Bob Moog then? Well, a man named David Van Koevering, who became a close friend and a mentor, and a wild-eyed kind of guy who was as much snake oil as he was substance, but good snake oil. He really knew how to sell stuff. He had been a tent preacher as a child, in point of fact, a proselytizer, a tent, underneath a tent, literally. David came to Nashville and wanted to meet me. He had heard, as he called me, this sage out in the middle of the country. I found this out later. He had told Bob, well, there's this sage out in the middle of the country, because I was doing this improbable research. And he came and showed me the mini Moog. Excuse me. I, of course, condemned it roundly immediately. Oh, my God, only 3 oscillators. And, it's just a little tiny system. We have big modular systems up here at the college. This is where it is. And it really wasn't until I actually came to the Moog Company to start working and went to a concert in which Mahavishnu Orchestra opened for Frank Zappa. Now, that was a pretty decent concert. And during the Mahavishnu portion, of course, that's when Jan Hammer was playing this incredible bending technique on the Mini Moog. And immediately after hearing that concert, I realized, oh, I get it. It's not necessarily a generator of clouds of sound and for avant-garde music and new music. It's a voice under control, just like a violin or an electric guitar or what. And subsequently, I wrote the Mini Moog manual because I felt like, well, gosh, this thing has a great deal of value. I don't know what the timing was exactly, but it was close on the heels. I became convinced, oh, this is an important instrument. It's an instrument.
Why wasn't there a manual already?
Well, there was, but the Moog Company was never all that keen on manuals. I wrote most of them over the years, starting with actually the Sonic 6, which Van Koevering made a commission. I was working in Florida with his partner. They were distributing Mini Moogs primarily through Vaco synthesizers. Van Koevering, V-A-K-O. Les Truby, who owned the largest organ dealership east of the Mississippi, was more or less a silent partner and supplied the funding and the general wisdom. And Dave was kind of the tip of the spear, going out and hauling the Mini Moogs around in his Cadillac and staying on the floor of a dealership until one sold to prove it could be done. I mean, nowadays, this is a fait accompli. It's like, yeah, okay, electronic instruments, who cares? At the time when all of us were trying to take a hand in selling these things, you got thrown out of stores. I was told even as late as I came into the mix in about 72, it'll never be a musical instrument and doesn't amount to anything and blah, da, 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 all that kind of business. But I had a clear vision that, yes, it will amount to a great deal because it represents personal freedom. And yeah, it's interesting that it grew up in America. I mean, we're about this individualism, I think, as much as anything. And Van Koevering had great faith, and he was a man of faith, literally. And he tended to have faith about things other than religion. He's just in that caste. So that was the worst marketing advice I'd ever given. When I first met David Van Koevering, I told him, this Mini Moog, it sucks. It's forget it. I wised up quite a bit after that. At any rate, David went to the Moog plant to solve some of their problems, started working there as the director of marketing. Well, he remembered me, and I was working for his partner, demonstrating Sonic 6s in the Pinellas County, Florida, public schools. So David says, how would you like to write a manual? I said, sure, I'll write a manual. I wrote a new manual for the Sonic 6. It had an old one, but it was rather poor. In that day, a manual is a second thought, an owner's manual, a second thought, and maybe an engineer was given that task and really didn't want to do it, and et cetera. They didn't really understand that the impediment to people using these things was not really distribution. It was education. They just didn't know how to use them. They didn't know what to think of it. They didn't know how to turn the knobs, how to make sounds, and so forth. And then I did a little tract called Meet Moog and Make Music, which was about education. And eventually Dave pulled me up to Buffalo area where the Moog plant was because it had been bought out by a venture capitalist named Bill Waitana. Bob's enterprise in Trumansburg had foundered somewhat. And again, I have written an article about that and have a lot to say about whether or not Bob was a good businessman. I think he was better. He was a damn good entrepreneur, that's for sure. And I can show cases of where that's the truth. But at any rate, then about 72, I was pulled up there by Van Koevering, and stayed in a motel and just kind of worked, without bringing my wife and so forth. Then eventually he offered me a job. I came up, I started running the Modular Systems division, doubled sales, and, realized some of the things you have to do, which probably violated Fair Trade Act laws, but we did them anyway, a small company, and flourished.
What sort of things?
Well, for instance, the problem that I encountered when I got there, and of course I was made VP. I mean, you have to have a title, in lieu of pay, vice president. And anyhow, there were 5 or 6 people around the country that knew about modular systems and could sell them. Paul Beaver on the West Coast, Walter Sear on the East Coast, a man named Greg Hockman. There were a couple of other people. And the problem was that institutions primarily were buying modular systems, and they were expensive, $15,000, a good hunk of change in 1972. So I realized that part of the impediment was that they were all bidding on everything. And so if a school decided to buy something, they had to have 3 bids, so I shouldn't do this on camera, but I will tell the rest of the story because I think it was probably illegal. But I looked at it and said, yeah, the problem is none of you can make any money because you're bidding against each other. They have to have 3 bids. I said, so here's the way it's going to work. And I did this all on the telephone. I didn't make any incriminating stuff. I called them all up and I said, here it is. Paul, you have California and Oregon, Washington, out to Vegas, and you've got this. I gave them territories. I said, now here's the way it works. When you get a bid from anywhere except in your territory, you bid list. Okay? List. Do you understand me? I want everybody to understand this, I said, now if you don't do this, I can't punish you. I'll just never answer the telephone. I'll never expedite anything you want done. I said, here's the deal, guys. You're all going to make money if you just do this. So you can bid slightly below list in your territory, but if it's out of your territory, do not bid anything other than list price. And each of you will say, well, we double sales in 6 months. But it was just, what did I know about business? I didn't even know there was a Sherman antitrust law then. I mean, I know about it now. But what did I know? So I just looked a very practical country boy view and said, well, nobody can make any money. Let's see to it that they make some money. This seems easy enough. Bang.